Well, we are in a series called A New Season. Some call it the eternal season. But let me remind you, it may have been a while since I told you where this actually came from. In 2011, a friend of mine and a prophetic voice, he lives in Blowing Rock, Kevin Troyer, called me with this word. Or I think he called or emailed. I can't remember how I got it. It's been a long time. It's been nearly 9 years at this point. But this is the word. We're entering a new season of expressing our core values and what we're called to do. This new expression, or the new expression of core values and calling, this is pretty interesting, will be further reaching around the globe, which I find interesting in this time in which we're living, and very local simultaneously. So that's where this word came from. That's the origination of the word. And earlier this year, before we knew just how crazy 2020 would actually turn out to be, and let's see, this is November the 29th, right? We still have a month to go. I told Alan this week, I'm planning a going away party for 2020. I'm going to call it Good Riddance. We may have to do it over Skype or over some other, but we're going to have a going away party for 2020. But I think as we look back, I really do believe, because even of what we sang today, I think as we look back, maybe even years from now, maybe even months from now as we move into 2021, what we'll actually realize is just how much God accomplished, how much He advanced His purpose in the earth and in His people and through His people. I think we're going to be surprised. But we're in a new season. I'm not going to regurgitate this morning, maybe next week, the 5 primary values, but I do want to go back to when I began this series back in July. In terms of our calling, I felt like the Lord said, begin with this one. This was actually a part of a word that was given to Taylorsville in Alexander County in 1991. And this is what the Lord declared. Even before this town was founded, I had ordained this place in the earth to be a place where my power could be found in abundance. For I have chosen this people, and I have put my name in this place. Listen, that there would be a glory that would radiate from here, that my word would flow forth freely, that my voice would be heard, that my heart would be felt, and my power seen. Every time I read those words, even though it's me, myself, and I reading them, my heart explodes within me with faith, with confidence, with a sense of God is intending to do something in this place and amongst this people. Wasn't spoken only to New Life, but when this word was given to me, and by way of a sister just handing me this word in 1995, 4 years after it had been given, from that moment I knew this is God. And I don't know how to explain this happens, but this was what happened in my heart. It was like, Lord, I don't know how many other congregations are going to say yes to this. I don't know whether eventually New Life will be found to stand alone in saying yes to this, or whether we will be surrounded by dozens of fellow believing churches. But it doesn't matter, because I'm saying yes to this word. And I've said over the years since then, I've at times in my discouragement and disappointment tried to escape the word. I've tried to shut it up. I've left the book and not looked at it for months on end, but I find it's like the prophet of Jeremiah said, it is like fire shut up in my bones, and I cannot contain it. So here we are again today, and so what I want to say is, as the Lord said to us in 2011 and then exploded it earlier this year, we are entering a new season of declaring, of releasing, of expressing our core values and that which we are called to do. Saints, listen to me. This is what we're called to do. This is who we are called to be. Now, I want to circle again because the emphasis now for many weeks has been on this element of this word. I have put my name in this place that there would be a glory that would radiate from here. I tell you, it's the longing of God's heart. It is the longing of God's heart. You see the longing, it's captured in the book of Isaiah where it talks about darkness will cover the earth. Yea, gross darkness will cover the peoples. But then he goes on to say, but a light, but a light. The light of his glory will shine upon you. I tell you, the 2020 may be a bit disorienting, discouraging, disappointing to us as humans, but it is God's backdrop for glory. Listen to that. It may look dark to us from a human perspective, but God is painting a backdrop for his glory. And let me declare this as plainly as I can. Emerging from this dark time is going to be a glorious church. And we ain't going to be left out in little old Taylorsville. That's right. Can somebody say yes? Yes. Can somebody say, I am in? Can somebody say, do not leave me out, God? Tell you got to remind yourself. I was thinking as we were singing that last song, which I just loved. I'd never heard it before because I don't hardly ever listen to anything, period. It was wonderful. But I was sitting there thinking about Joshua after that. You know, they've been given this wonderful commission to go in and take the promised land. And then they have this wonderful victory. And the next thing you know, after the wonderful victory at Jericho, they find the humiliating defeat of Ai. Wasn't it Ai? And Joshua is like, I understand. He must have absolutely been devastated, confused, disappointed, all of the above. And he's like wallowing around on the ground like a worm. You remember what happened? The Lord said, get up. Get up. That defeat does not define who you are. Get up. And I heard the Lord say, some of you need to hear that today. Get up. Those of you who are with us online, the Lord is saying to some of you, get up. Get up. I have a calling on your life. The calling is that the glory of God would shine upon you and through you. But let's move on. We've revisited this word for weeks now. We're almost near the end of this season, so enjoy it. Saturate yourself in this word that the Lord gave to Mary Jo in January of 2019. Prepare to become a place where the glory of God does not just come to visit, but rather where the glory of God comes to dwell. Let it sink in. Let it saturate your thinking, your mind, your emotions. God has a calling on you, upon us, and even upon the geographic location in the earth to be a habitation of the glory. Now, that being said, we have been working our way from Ephesians 2:22 as a scriptural touch point for a number of weeks, and we're just about to finish this part of the series, where Paul writes to the church in Ephesus, and it is a resounding call to every local church of every generation since Jesus poured out the Holy Spirit. In Him you are being built together into a dwelling place for God by the Spirit. I tell you, this is such an important understanding. This is such an important revelation This revelation is worth fighting every relational struggle that you have over. This promise is worth humbling yourselves 1,000,000 times if that's what it takes. This is a wonderful promise from the Lord. In Him you are being built together to become a dwelling place for God by the Spirit. But as we track from this statement in Ephesians 2:22, and you can watch it. If you read that letter carefully, you see it. You see the line go to, You see the line go to Ephesians 4:1, where he is referring back and he says, I therefore, a prisoner for the Lord, urge you to walk in a manner worthy of the calling to which you have received, to which you've been called. The calling to be a dwelling place for God by the Spirit. And then the line continues, and we've been looking at this into Ephesians 5:3, where he declares, but sexual immorality and all all impurity or covetousness must not be even named among you. You see the line? Now, saints, we really do have to embrace, without any legalism, the call to holiness. I've heard this statement resounding in my spirit for days. Just become who you are. This is not a matter of legalism. This is a matter of simply becoming who I am in Christ. This is not a matter of legalism. This is about you and me growing up, maturing, casting off the old and allowing the new. We're not actually necessarily bringing something upon us as much as we are allowing what is within us to come out. Yes. That's what this call is for. I don't apologize for the call. Now let's move on. So let's look at this statement. I was joking this morning. I may forever be known as the guy who preaches all the time about sex, because I preached on it for 3 weeks running. Forget the fact I hadn't talked about it for 10 years before, hardly at all. But last week and the week before and the week before that, we dealt with seriously, I make light of it in a way, but I'm dead serious. Sexual immorality is devastating to the body of Christ. You got to understand, sexual immorality is devastating to the body of Christ. A couple of weeks ago, I actually led us to the point where I could make this statement: no other sin desecrates the temple in the same measure or the same way as sexual immorality, the temple being the Holy Spirit. So it's important, so I don't make any apologies for 3 weeks. But glory be to God, I must admit, I'm glad to move on. All right, so we're moving on. Now, next week, I'm giving you a break today because we're only going to talk about 33 sins, give or take. But then next week, I'm coming back after the jugular of the American church, and we're going to talk about covetousness, materialism, greed. Use whatever word you want to, but next week we're coming back after the great idol of humanity. The great competition that God has in the earth for the hearts of men and women. So consider today, as we only address 28, 29, 30, 31, 32 sins, a breather. Amen? And so now we're talking about the second statement, which is where he says all impurity. Now, I had to break out of a circle because one circle doesn't work for defining this word. Here's the Greek word, which I will not try to actually pronounce, but let's start with circle 1. It can signify unrestrained sexual behavior. But let's go on to a little bit bigger circle. The same word has a wide range of meaning and encompasses riotous and excessive listening, which, by the way, can include unrestrained sexual behavior. But I want somebody to ask me, Steve, why did you leave a space? Because there's a bigger circle. The same word also is used to describe every type of moral impurity. So what you got to understand is riotous and excessive living in general can go into the circle. Unrestrained sexual behavior can go into the circle, but I got news for you. Covetousness can go into the circle. Being mean and obnoxious to your neighbor can go into the circle. So it's every type of moral impurity. Say that with me. Every type of moral impurity. So the question is, which is it? In Ephesians 5:3. Well, I like the fact that we have a real clue. Going back, we have that little word, all. In Greek, I think it's P-A-S, but it means all or every. So, but sexual immaturity and all impurity, which is every type of moral impurity or covetousness, must not even be named among you. Now, what's Paul doing here? Let me say to you, he's declaring war on everything, and we're going to talk about that today. But he's pointing out in this scripture of everything, the Ephesian church needed a little extra help on two things. And I'm just telling you something, the American church needs the same help. We've got an issue with everything, but of everything, the two big issues that we need help with are sexual immorality and covetousness. Amen? But let's go into this issue of every type of moral impurity. Now, this is what Jesus is speaking of in Mark 7:20 through 21. When he says, what comes out of a person is what defiles him. Can anybody recognize the connection between defilement and impurity? I mean, I'm at this point, Kelly makes fun of me before everybody, and I make no apologies. Make fun of me. But I will not die of food poisoning. You know, Thanksgiving dinner, that was great turkey, by the way, Andy. I mean, dude, you nailed it. I think we should break it out of the holidays and bring it into the stream of everyday life. He smoked a good, it wasn't smoking, it was grilled it. Huh? Smoked it. It was good. Huh? Smoked and cooked. It must have been, because it was good. I mean, seriously, it really was good. But fortunately, after Kelly and I were quarantined briefly, won't go into all of that. That's going around now, it seems. So when lunch was over, they put all the stuff in a nice, safe bag that had stuff to make it stay what it needed to stay. You know what I'm talking about. Insulated, thank you. Andy's my helper today. And rushed it to the house. And because I wasn't ready to eat yet, I immediately rushed it to the refrigerator. Why? I don't want it to spoil. I do not want any impurities. I do not want this temple defiled. I do not want this temple leaning over the commode vomiting for 4 or 5 hours. You understand what I'm saying? Now let me tell you, I think about this, and the Holy Spirit works with me in these things because I'm so sensitive in this matter. So Kelly had made some soup earlier in the week. I forget what day it was. Monday she had made some soup, and so yesterday I put some of it up and heated it up in a bowl in the microwave, and the thought came from the Holy Ghost, I'm sure. How long is it actually safe to eat soup after it was made? So about the time I'm ready to start eating, I Googled it, and you know what I find out? Generally speaking, 3 days. Huh?
It's not good, though. It don't even taste good till after.
Yeah, Andy. Let's see who makes out best in the long term. Watch us. Now, I'm making light and making fun, although I'm dead serious. It's a picture of a concern about defilement. Because defilement damages. And so that's what Jesus is talking about, except this is much more important than food poisoning or a stomach or throwing up over a commode for 4 or 5 hours. This is about a person's heart. This is about the entire personality. Jesus says what comes out of a person is what defiles him. For from within, out of the heart of man, come evil thoughts, sexual immorality, theft, murder, adultery, coveting, wickedness, deceit, sensuality, envy, slander, pride, foolishness. All these evil things come from within, and they defile a person. That's what we're talking about. Now, I'm just going to breeze through them generally speaking, but let's hit these. Now I want you to understand part of what I'm doing here today. I honestly do not think you online or you here are, I'm not trying to, it's not like I think you're guilty of any of this stuff. I need you to understand that. But I do know this. By and large, the things that we declare today, from God's perspective, as impurities or defiling things in the earth, by and large, those outside of Christ would not be in agreement with us. Would not be in agreement with biblical truth. So one of the things that you must understand that I know that I'm doing today as we declare these things is it's as if we are driving stakes in the ground, in the spirit realm, making a declaration. When Jesus says evil thoughts, we as the church are saying, we agree, Lord, that's defilement. When Jesus says sexual immorality, we raise up and say, we agree with you, Lord, that's defiling. When Jesus says theft, even the desire to steal or cheat on your taxes, if I could meddle just a little bit, we, the church, agree that what is Caesar's belongs to Caesar, and it's defilement to steal. We agree, Lord, that murder, but let me back up a little bit to the Sermon on the Mount, because we understand from Jesus that his definition of murder, if you trace it back, is anger as a state of mind. We agree, Lord, that that is not truth. Moving on, adultery. I didn't put this one in, but we also know the Lord from the Sermon on the Mount made a clear declaration. Adultery, whether it's in reality or in my heart. Moving on. Coveting. We'll talk about that next week. Wickedness. Deceit. Sensuality. Let me give you a better reading of that. Unbridled lust. Envy. Slander. Pride. And one I can't quite figure out how it all fits is foolishness. These are the things Paul is speaking of when he writes to the Ephesian church that such things must not even be named amongst us. But let's move on to Paul himself. Galatians 5, this is the longest list, has 15 items on it. Now, the works of the flesh are evident. There we have the lead-off thing, which actually leads off nearly every list in the New Testament: sexual immorality, impurity, sensuality, adultery. Let me just go through them this way. Riotous and excessive living in this case. Sensuality, which is unbridled lust, remember. Idolatry, not idolatry, idolatry. We're going to get on that next week. Putting anything ahead of God or before God. Sorcery. Now we're going to pause for just a moment. Now we need to stop for just a moment and go into one. This word in the Greek is pharmakia. Many of you already know this. It actually comes from a root word which means literally, specifically, a drug. Anybody been to a pharmacist lately? Our English word comes from this word, pharmakia, or from the root of this word. But pharmakia specifically, not the root, but the specific word, means the occult, sorcery, witchcraft, illicit pharmaceuticals, trance, magical incantations with drugs. Now I want us to watch this and not run past it too quickly, because this is actually a fairly important one at the moment. Watch it. The KJV, NASV, and NIV, in a rare moment of solidarity, all use one word: witchcraft. The New Century Version uses two words: doing witchcraft. And then we move into the Living Bible, which actually turned out to be my favorite, by the way. Calls it spiritism, and in parentheses, that is encouraging the activity of demons. Don't forget that. But moving on, the CJB, involvement with the occult and with drugs. The CEB, drug use and casting spells. And then finally, in a moment of brevity, GW and NOG, Name of God Bible, drug use. Now, why am I dragging us through this? Because I think we would all agree, I'm pretty sure all of us agree in this room, that witchcraft is bad. So say with me, witchcraft is bad. But I tell you something, let me put up a statement, and I want to just make a declaration. Mind-altering drugs invite and encourage the activity of demons in an individual's life. What this looked like when Paul was writing to the church in Ephesus 2,000 years ago, the scope of society looked different. His application of pharmakia looked different than it does at this hour, generally speaking. But if we go back and pull out the nut, the most important thing we can learn, it is this: mind-altering drugs invite and encourage the activity of demons in an individual's life. Now, friends, we got to get that. Get that with me. Say it with me. Mind-altering drugs and invite and encourage the activity of demons in an individual's life. All right, now stick with me. December the 6th, 2012. Does anybody know the significance of that date? On that date, the state of Washington in the United States of America made it law that recreational use of marijuana is legal. Now let me tell you why that has become a major problem. 4 days later, Colorado followed suit. I promise you the tide has shifted and is moving in that direction. And unless God sends a mighty revival on this land, it will be the law of the land. Now, why is that a problem?
Because if the law doesn't make it right.
You got it, my friend. Pat yourself on the back. Let me tell you pastorally when I realized that this was a major issue, that what happened in Colorado mattered in North Carolina. It wasn't long after that I was ministering to a young man, a young believer. And he had equated legality with okay. I realized a shift is about to take place in the next generation. The enemy is not after the law as much as he's after the mind and the hearts of a generation of people. I chose my statement a while ago purposely: mind-altering drugs. People make the argument that marijuana doesn't damage. Okay. But friends, I'm going to tell you, it alters the mind. You say, well, how can you say that? Well, listen, some of you younger ones, forgive me up front, but I have not always been a Christian. Before I came to Christ, I smoked dope.
Did you inhale?
And unlike Bill Clinton, I inhaled. You stole my line. Franklin, turn around, I'm going to kick you in the... That actually worked out fairly well. Listen, I'm telling you something, friends. Listen to me. I'm bringing you news from the laboratory of real life. It alters your mind. People say it's not a gateway drug. I don't know if it is a gateway drug in terms of the physical body or not. Let me tell you, though, it is a gateway drug to the demonic realm. And I state that with absolute certainty. Now, why am I being so strong on this issue? Because remember, I've been strong on abortion. I've been strong on the issue of gay marriage, because those are two of the areas where the church has got to stand up and stick a stake in the ground in our generation and say, not on my watch. Well, I give you today a third area that we have got to stand up in this time, drive a stake in the ground and say, not on our watch. Like it or not, this is pharmakia in action. This is people opening their lives, their bodies, their families to the demonic realm. And I say that without apology. It is the weirdest thing. Let me tell you what's strange. Brian had the word about ruins. I find this so absolutely fascinating, infuriating, and challenging, and confusing all at the same time. I will talk with an individual who wants to retain the right to smoke dope and walk with Jesus, and argue with me why it is okay, as I stand back listening and watching them argue from amidst the ruins of their life. Do you hear what I'm saying? People are arguing their rightness almost as if they cannot see. Can you not see this is destroying your life? Why is it destroying their life? They have opened the gateway to the demonic realm. Those boogers don't come alone. They don't ask. No, the gate's open, friends. Listen, why am I giving so much time in a sermon to this issue? Because it's massively important Senior saints, senior citizen saints, young saints. This doesn't just affect those token. It affects their children. And it'll affect their grandchildren. And then their great-grandchildren. You've got to understand, the demonic realm is not only interested in one life. What their passion is families and family lines. So this is not a matter of disagreeing. This is a matter of vital importance. So I chose this as the way I'll describe that word that Paul writes: drug use and the occult. You choose for yourself which is the most dangerous. Pastorally, I find it a lot more difficult to deal with the drug use aspect. Everybody take a deep breath. Say, brother, you feel better now? I feel like I've done been set free. You got to carry this burden with me. Don't be sending your children to me to convince them. You just go back and listen to that portion of the sermon again and again and again and again until you get it. And then you stand with all confidence before your children or grandchildren and say, listen, let me tell you that is a gateway to the demonic realm. And do not back off. Your grandchildren are in play here. Enmity, strife, jealousy, fits of anger. Somebody say, you got to do the inflection right. Say this with me. Fits of anger? Say it again, like a question. Fits of anger? Right there in the list with pharmakia? Keep going. Rivalries? Dissensions? Divisions? Envy? I'm reading this for like the 90th time, and it's almost like I got whiplash. You know, Paul went from all this stuff, partying and all of that stuff, and then he shifts into stuff about enmity and strife and jealousy, and then he ends up with envy. Do you see the connection? And then suddenly he goes, drunkenness and orgies. I need to clarify that, if you don't mind. That word is literally drinking parties involving unrestrained indulgence in alcoholic beverages and accompanying immoral behavior. Can anybody say wild partying?
Spring break.
Spring break's a good picture. But I got whiplash. And in the whiplash, there was something that needed to be said to the church. You remember we started this journey together some weeks ago now, and we're dealing with two major categories of stuff. Number one is relational holiness, and number two is moral holiness. And I want you to see that the Apostle Paul and Jesus and all of the writers of the New Testament, they weave in and out of those things as if there are no two. In fact, there's only one holiness. I divided it only for conversation's sake, but I want us to understand the call to holiness is a call to holiness. Now, why is that important at this moment? Let me say it this way. The Pharisees had, generally speaking, moral holiness downright well. You probably couldn't accuse them of a whole lot of moral unholiness. But dude, they blew it when it came to relational holiness. And the great danger for the evangelical church carrying the banner of truth is that we'll do the same thing. So the call to holiness, say this with me, the call to holiness is a call to relational holiness and moral holiness. It's amazing to me that somebody can, in a fit of absolute rage and anger, in one moment at their spouse, turn around the next moment to a friend and begin to decry those wild partying teenagers. Can you say, uh-oh? Say, uh-oh. And then he goes on saying things like these. It's like, 15 was my limit. But let's land the plane. So all of that, you see I made that big, but sexual immorality and all impurity. And remember how Paul finished his list? And things like that. Or covetousness must not even be named among you, as is proper among saints. Or saints, you know, is set apart ones. God's holy people. And I thought about that. And I thought, you know, it might be good as we begin to close today and then pretty close to closing this part of the series that we maybe go back and look in the larger context for just a moment, this verse, Ephesians 5:3. You know, I find this happens sometimes when I go back and I pull back and I see a little bit larger context and I just read it, it impacts me. So I want to ask you to close your eyes. And I just want to read to you the Word of God and let it impact your mind, let it impact your soul, let it impact your spirit. But sexual immorality and all impurity or covetousness must not even be named among you, as is proper among saints. Let there be no filthiness, nor foolish talk, nor crude joking, which are out of place, but instead let there be thanksgiving. For you may be sure of this, that everyone who is sexually immoral or impure, or who is covetous, that is, an idolater, has no inheritance in the kingdom of Christ and of God. Let no one deceive you with empty words. For because of these things, the wrath of God comes upon the sons of disobedience. Now open your eyes and let's read two final passages. I'm going to read them, but follow along. I couldn't help but think about this, and I really love the way the Passion Translation treats it. I think it's a really good way to land today. To the church. Because here's the challenge, isn't it? It's not a matter of all of those, I joked about 30 things. Who knows how many there were? I didn't count. But the issue is not so much to the people of God. Not that there's not a difference, but it's not so much you out trotting around doing these things. The real question to us is, how many of those things is in our heart? How many of those things are in my heart? That's the real issue, isn't it? And so the call always is the call Paul gives in 2 Corinthians, beginning in verse 16 of chapter 6. What friendship does God's temple have with demons? You know, because all of those things that we touched on today, briefly except for a couple of them, do you know all of those things have their origin in the demonic realm? Do you know that word, the primary use for its root, almost exclusively is used in one way in the New Testament? And it's to record the words of Jesus or the actions of Jesus when it talks about unclean spirits. I found that really fascinating. What friendship does God's temple have with demons? For indeed, we are the temple of the living God. Just as God has said, I will make my home in them and walk among them. I will be their God, and they will be my people. For this reason, come out from among them and be separate. Be different. Say that with me. Be different. Say it again. Be different. Say, be different. Says the Lord, touch nothing that is unclean, and I will embrace you. I will be a true father to you, and you will be my beloved sons and daughters, says the Lord Yahweh Almighty. But I want to close with this, the next statement. There's a chapter division, but there was no chapter division when Paul wrote. He moves right into this statement. Beloved ones, with promises like that, and because of our deepest respect and worship for God, we must remove everything from our lives that contaminates body and spirit, and continue to complete the development of holiness within us. What a privilege to be. What a privilege to be a temple of the living God. What a privilege. Do you count it a privilege, believer? And what a privilege it is to be called together a temple, a dwelling place of God, and to be given an invitation to be a habitation of the glory. What an incredible privilege. My effort over these past weeks, which will be finalized next week as we deal with covetousness, is with one thing in mind and one thing only. It is rooting out of us individually and corporately anything that would be a hindrance to the glory. When all's said and done, in terms of your life, having brought this word and bring the word next week, my job will be finished. It is not my job to manipulate or cajole, to force. Even to beg. I'll turn my attention to this vessel. And I'm asking you to turn your attention to your vessel. And I'm not so much asking today that you consider your actions, as I am asking that you consider the insight that the Lord gave to Prophet Samuel when he selected King David from amongst his many brothers. When one after one, those older, good-looking, strong bucks went before him, one after one, the prophet thought, this one, no. This one, no. This one, no. All disqualified. And he knows it. He knows prophetically, I've not yet seen the one that's called to be king. So Samuel says to Jesse, have you got another son? He says, yeah, but you wouldn't be interested in him. He's the runt of the litter. He's the young one. He's out watching that little motley group of sheep we own. Will you go fetch him? Because nobody's eaten a bite until that boy gets here. And when he gets here, the prophet recognizes this is the guy. And then the Lord records for Samuel and for us, for eternity, a most important understanding of the spiritual realm. I don't look on the outward appearance. I look upon the heart. I stand before you today as a preacher of the kingdom of heaven, of the good news of the gospel, and I declare to you that word today as a group of people and as individuals whose passion it is to see the glory of God come. Allow the Lord to search your heart and respond. Is there any impurity? That needs to be laid before the Lord. I want to ask the worship team to come. I consider these moments of invitation holy moments now. Moments when all that I could do has been done, and now it's the Lord working in the hearts and lives of His people. And I'm trusting the Holy Spirit and you to do the right thing. I apply this to you who are at home today or watching us from perhaps another home with someone. If you're there, find a place that you can call an altar. For those of you who are here, I remind you the altar is open. Human beings, being as we are, we generally need some physical way to respond to the inward working of God. It's a way of activating our faith. As it happens, you find yourself, fortunately, to be in a grace zone, in a no judgment zone. So as you come to the altar today, you come just to do business with the Lord, but I do beg you to come. Brian, I think I saw you carrying a tote bag of clothes for the water today. So that's available. The baptism is available today. Trevor's going to be up here. If you'd like to be baptized, please come. We're talking about a cleansing. Allow the cleansing within by stepping in faith through a cleansing without. So I want to ask you to stand, and I just want to pray. Take my water and sit down. Lord, I want to thank you for the privilege, individually and also corporately, of being invited to become a habitation of the glory. And I want to thank you, Lord, that you really have been incredibly methodical and patient over these past weeks to cleanse, to purify, to challenge, and to change. And Lord, as we near the end of this time of preparation, I invite you, Lord, that your all-consuming fire, as you prophetically pointed out today, would even increase. Because we really want to be the people that you desire. A people who can host the presence and the glory. So now, Lord, we invite you and ask you to work in our lives and to guide us in responding. And in the authority of the name of Jesus, we say, amen. Bless you, saints.